Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And this is a bit of a different video about the nature of happiness and decisions, and I haven't really figured out the title just yet, so you'll see that down below, whatever it ends up actually being. And unrelated, but yes, this is Primal set up on my table. This video is not about Primal, but I am set up for my second playthrough of the game to try to give it another shot and see exactly, well, I'm getting distracted. Either way, Primal, we'll get to my opinion later. But the nature of being happy and making decisions and understanding what you're signing up for. And this is a conversation that is happening because of a combination of two different things. The first is I recently did an interview with Meepleville Meets, and there'll be a link down to his channel, to the interview down below. I do recommend subscribing. Tim is a incredibly solid interviewer. I've enjoyed watching all of his interviews with the various people he has engaged with, and he pushes and he probes. And one of the things he pushed and probed on in the interview is the nature of my content around Kickstarter is very heavily based on the idea that, is it a good back? Should you get it? Should you back it? Should you not? Why or why not? It's not. It's not based on the idea that, hey, that game looks shiny, let me just get it. And he asked the question of, do I think that the nature of being overly critical about everything, critical meaning thinking critical, not critical, attacking critical, but the nature of being critical about every decision I make around Kickstarter, does it ever just get in the way of the fun? Does it ever just stop me from getting something that I just want to enjoy? That was the first point, and we'll get to the answer soon. The second was a video with Jesse Samuel Anderson, not Quackalope. He has a different channel as well, that Jesse Samuel Anderson. It's his personal channel where he engages in a lot of motivational stuff, a lot of interesting things about like building a business, being an entrepreneur, how to do different things, how to push forward, how to always make the right decisions, how to plan, organize, different concepts around just general improvement, not board game specific. He touches upon board games here and there. And again, link to that down below. And I did a video with him in that channel about the nature of time management, of doubling up on your time. Something I've talked about a lot in my videos here and there. A lot's probably relative. Something I've talked about in my videos here and there is the nature of doubling up on time. That playing board games with your spouse is both, building your relationship and having fun. Playing board games, in my case, for content. Sitting down, playing solo, playing Primal solo for both, enjoying the game as well as putting out a video. That's doubling up on my time. And I like the idea of doubling up on my time. I often have a harder time doing some things if it's not in some way fulfilling as many criteria as possible because of the nature of having a limited time. So, for example, I recently visited Jesse, and when I went on the trip to Jesse where I filmed that video, I scheduled a call with someone who I like to have regular calls with, and I scheduled a call for the drive so I can double up on my time. On the way there, and that was on the way back, on the way there, I put out a general post asking, hey, reach out to me, talk to me, let's connect. And I spoke with a whole bunch of people in the industry, both, general viewers as well as people in the business itself, and got a lot of extra value out of that time. And that concept of doubling up on your time is something that I value. And I got a comment on that video. A good comment, not an attacking comment, but a good comment, but the nature of it, the questioning, same idea as before. Questioning that if you're constantly looking at things as the value of time, if you're constantly placing such a huge value on time, there's a degree of just not being able to enjoy yourself that you risk. It was a very well put comment. It was talking about the other side of the coin. It wasn't saying I'm wrong. It was just talking about you have to factor in that sometimes if you place too much of an emphasis on the value of time, you may not be able to enjoy yourself, which is true to an extent. I remember a few months ago when I was driving home from work and I saw someone on a lawn chair. Actually, I think it was pre-COVID, so it must have been longer than that. It must have been a year ago by now. Well, I saw someone on a lawn chair outside their house just reading a book. And I sat there thinking to myself that the idea of sitting on a lawn chair just outside relaxing is something that's fairly foreign to me. I just wouldn't really be able to do that because my time is very scheduled and I am doing a lot of things in life and I just don't sit outside on lawn chairs reading books. And I was a little bit envious of the concept of just being able to just sit there and just not do something. So there's truth to the concept. But I don't think there's a lot of truth to the concept. I think it's far more about acting with intent. It's about far more about understanding the decisions you're making, weighing up the pros and cons, and simply deciding how you want to move forward given those constraints. And sometimes knowledge can be a curse. Sometimes, to quote Cypher from The Matrix, Well, I don't think it's him originally, but in Cypher. Cypher from the Matrix nonetheless has a quote, "Ignorance is bliss." In the Matrix, the machines are taking over, and we're all stuck in that Matrix and being used for batteries and just living these fake lives. And Cypher, who's not happy with the fact that he knows he's in a revolution fighting against the machines, says ignorance is bliss. Not knowing all these things can sometimes enable you or can free you, which I disagree with. I mostly disagree with the concept that ignorance is bliss. Knowing that just lets you make a better, a more informed choice. One of the things I talked about in that video with Jesse and the nature of time and the value of time is I have a friend who really likes alcohol. Expensive alcohol. Not relatively expensive, maybe $100 a bottle. Nothing crazy, but nothing cheap either. And he, at one point, when he was at his last job and he wasn't making all that much, he was, running, he's in a warehouse, a little bit higher, a little bit management, but still wasn't making a ton of money. And I did the math of how much his shot of alcohol was costing him. And I told him, every time you have a shot, you're basically trading 40 minutes of work, 40 minutes of your life to have that shot. I think it was 40 minutes, it might have been more. I can't remember the exact. We did the math on the bottle, how many shots there were, how much he was getting paid. We figured it all out. And it's a striking remark that singular shot of alcohol required him giving up 40 minutes of his time, 40 minutes of his life, working at the job for 40 minutes in order to have that shot. And I think it was actually more. I vaguely recall it being more, but either way, whatever it was. And he was like, "You're a buzzkill. You're ruining this fun for me." And he's not wrong. I was ruining the fun for him. I was taking away the luxury of ignorance. I was taking away the luxury of just not knowing that he was drinking something that was costing him his life. And that's a value on time. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you can act with intent, even when acting incorrectly. There's nothing wrong with saying, this thing is expensive and I want to get it. But if you have to sit there and lie to yourself to do it, you're probably doing something wrong. Sure, the ignorance helps, but you're also giving up your time, your money, you've given those things up. So the upside of not having to weigh the consequences of what you've done has a downside that you're just choosing to ignore in the moment but will show up. When you eat that donut and you're trying to lose weight, as I always am, when you eat that donut and you put on those calories and you refuse to think about the balance, you refuse to think that donut is equal to like 4 hours of exercise. It's really striking just how much exercise it takes to lose a single donut. When you sit there and you do that, and meanwhile you are exercising every week, you're putting in your 20 minutes a day, the amount of time and energy it takes to earn that donut back is insane. It's absolutely insane. And so when you do it and you choose to ignore the consequences, yes, sure, the donut is more enjoyable. But then later, when you're looking at that scale, wondering why you can't shed those last 5 pounds, there is a reason, there is an answer, and the answer is that you chose to ignore reality. Alternatively, you can sit there and say, you know what, I've had a hard day, and I really want that donut, and I understand what it's going to do, and still do it. And the donut won't be less enjoyable. I'm not saying don't make decisions. I'm not saying don't make decisions that don't have a cost-benefit analysis. To quote my answer to Tim from Meepleville when he asked me that question, I said there are times when I do just get that game. Because in reality, when I'm looking at board game Kickstarters and I'm looking at that and I say this is not worth it, what I'm really saying is I'm not saying don't get the game that I want. I'm saying don't get the game that I want now. Get it at retail later when it'll be cheaper and a better buy. Why get it now? And I told him in reality the only time I really do allow myself the luxury of getting a game and just ignoring the monetary aspect of it is when the FOMO kicks in. When I believe that the game may not be available at retail. May not. It doesn't even have to be. But if I'm worried about it, and I like the game enough to make that decision, to take that risk, then sure, I'll get the game. I will make an quote-unquote irresponsible back because I want that game and I'm willing to pay the premium to get it. But I do so with the knowledge that it's not necessarily the best back I've ever made. I've done that recently. Feed the Kraken is a great game that I really enjoyed, and I sat there and I said, I don't know if this is a good back. The retail version is for sure not a good back. The deluxe version might be. It depends how limited their limited release is. But I like the game enough that I'll pay the extra $15 and get it now. And if I overpay, so be it. There was a degree of FOMO attached to the decision. And sure enough, the retail, the deluxe edition showed up for pre-order in some stores, and it was like $15 more, or $15 less, or whatever it was. But I walked in knowing that. It didn't hurt my decision. I have no regrets. I knew the risks. I made the decision understanding the cost-benefit analysis, and I'm totally fine with it, because it was a decision that had a risk and reward either way. And similarly, that donut. When you don't eat that donut, when you don't have that shot of alcohol, when you don't buy that board game, go to Starbucks, whatever it is, there is something you're giving up. You're giving up the enjoyment of that thing that you want. So it's simply a cost-benefit analysis of, is it worth it or not? Act with intent. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying act with intent, understanding the consequences of your action. If you have to lie to yourself to do things, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. There's likely a reason that you're lying to yourself. I remember a conversation with my friends once when they were moving. They just bought a house, and they wanted to replace their couch. By the way, I really am a Buzzkill, just to be very clear here. But they wanted to buy a new couch, and they didn't need a new couch. They were very clear about it. They're like, oh, it's just an opportunity to get new things, because we're moving anyway, so we may as well. And they wanted to buy a $1,000 couch. And I was like, just understand the math here. When you buy a house, when you engage in a 30-year mortgage, if you buy something, it depends on the interest rate. It will very much depend. I think right now interest rates are lower to buying homes, so right now it's a little better. But at the time, it was roughly like a 4 or 5% interest rate. It's like you understand that $1,000 now, $1,000 that you spend now, versus putting into your mortgage, is literally double the value. Just the nature of interest rates, the 4% a year for 30 years, once it works out, every $1,000 that you put into your house now is an extra bit of investment, of principal on the house, so you don't have to pay interest in it for 30 years. It's worth twice that $1,000. Which means that couch that you don't need, that couch that you've stayed very clear about the fact that it's a luxury purchase you're allowing yourself, is not $1,000, it's $2,000. And if that's worth it, go ahead and get it. Just understand the true cost to what you are actually doing here. And they called me a buzzkill. It's surprising that I have friends. Genuinely, at this point, it is surprising. By the way, both those people, still friends with them, don't know why. I must be doing something right, or maybe they just like board games. One of them plays board games, the other one doesn't. But anyways, by the way, in general, jokes aside, I'm a lot more sensitive to these conversations. I don't have these conversations with people who aren't clearly willing to have the conversation. We enjoy talking, and it comes up. I'm not really just a total 100% buzzkill. But nonetheless, so they bought the couch, and that's fine. But they were a little, upset about it now. It was a little bit less fun for them, because I think that they were acting, I think they had decided they wanted the couch, and they didn't want to know the consequences of their actual action. Which I think is key. I think we have to know the consequences. We can act the way we want. But if you want to avoid waking up when you're 50 and realizing that you haven't put $1 into savings, because that is the reverse of this conversation. There is two sides to every coin. People are often so afraid of one thing that they refuse to understand and recognize that there is always fear on the other side of a decision. So sure, you can act for the next 50 years without consequence, without regard for the decisions you're making, without regard to the fact that months go by, every single month. How much money are you putting into savings? Because something I plan on talking about in another video, the nature of credit card debt, it's going to be a whole different video. But I think it's 82% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That's the stat. 82% live paycheck to paycheck. Which means one of two things. Either, coincidentally and incredibly luckily and fortunately, 82% of people make exactly what they need to survive. Or it means people spend what they have. And that's it. They just manage to spend what they have. Because if you're going further into debt every month, I understand that. That's one thing. That means you're running on a deficit. That's fine. It's not fine. It's horrible and terrible. And I hope you get out of that situation as soon as possible. But at least it makes sense. But the idea that for the past, think about your life for the past 5 years. Have you gone further into debt in the past 5 years? And have you put money into savings in the past 5 years? If the answer to both of those is no, then you are managing to spend exactly what you make on a regular basis. And that means that we are acting without regard for the future. Which if you want to, that's fine. If you choose to, if you say, I want to get that extra thing, I just got a raise right now and somehow I'm going to figure out a way to manage to spend exactly what I have. If you want to do that with intent because you value the life you have today and you don't want to in any way compromise your lifestyle, that's fine. Act with intent. But understand that part of that intent is that 50 years from now when you're trying to retire, you'll have nothing in the bank. You'll have nothing there to actually help you retire. Do you know how much money it takes to retire? It can take millions of dollars to successfully retire when you're going to be older. You're going to have needs that need to be paid for. This video is getting more depressing the longer it goes on, but the point is that there's always another shoe that will drop. There's always something else that is a cost to the actions that we're doing. You have to factor those in. You can act with intent, and it's not being a buzzkill. You can value your time And it's not being a buzzkill for the reason I cannot sit on the lawn chair outside and just read a book. And I do read books, by the way. I play games, I watch movies, I have fun. It's very specifically dedicated, it's allocated time for me. It's very much allocated. I know when game night is. I play games more due to content creation, but I play like 800 games a year. I have a date night every week with my wife. I am far from someone who does not have fun in my life. But it's allocated, specific, it's when I want it to be, and the concept of coming home and relaxing is something that I do not allow myself. You might want to allow yourself that, but I don't allow it to myself because I'm working towards the future. I'm trying to hustle and do what I need to do. I'm working 3 jobs effectively. I have my day job, I have Board Game Co., the retail company, and I have this YouTube space now that I'm doing as well. And all 3 of those things are money that I try to save so that one day I can actually make decisions that I want with a lot more freedom, a greater degree of freedom. And YouTube is becoming a huge part of that long-term plan as well, because it has enabled me to sit there and say, you know what, maybe there's another way that I can make money and still get to retire at some point while doing this full time, because this to me is not work, not in the typical sense. This to me is far more rewarding, far more engaging. The idea of interacting with people, talking about board games, which is a fascinating, fun hobby to begin with, but being able to have these types of conversations where if in some way I can add value to anyone's life. Again, that video on credit cards, which will be coming at some point soon, I don't know exactly when, that video is if it causes a single person to not put themselves in debt to buy a board game, then this entire YouTube thing will be worth it. 100%. Not even a question to me. And then lastly, and this is a big one, and it's something we touched upon throughout the video, spending isn't inherently wrong. There's nothing wrong with being on that lawn chair. There's nothing wrong with buying that couch. There's nothing wrong with getting that Starbucks coffee, eating that donut, whatever that decision you're making, taking that shot of alcohol. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. It's not that there's inherently a good side and a bad side. You just have to weigh up what makes sense. If you're not trying to lose weight, that donut's not a problem. If you are trying to lose weight, that donut has another cost that should be factored into your decision. If you are barely able to scrape by or save any money, maybe just have some other coffee in the morning. Buy yourself a $10 coffee machine and get yourself a regular black coffee or something, I don't know, a little bit of creamer. You can have what you want. Or you could spend $10 a day on Starbucks by going to and from Starbucks, whatever it is. But it's not a problem if you can afford it. If you're still putting money into savings, if you're still making the right choices, if you're ensuring that there's no other shoe that will drop on your decision, there's nothing wrong with it. I know people who spend thousands of dollars a month on board games and they are still able to save money, which means that as long as they're acting with intent, as long as they're factoring it in, the biggest thing you want to ensure you're doing is that you are not causing with your decisions harm to yourself or others around you that you care about. You want to ensure that. That should be your first and foremost priority in life. And going back to the Matrix, going back to Cypher and his ignorance is bliss. If I were in Cypher's position, if I were in the Matrix, and you offered me the choice to go back in, red pill or blue pill, I'd choose ignorance. I would choose to go back to the Matrix so I can lead a life that is happy as opposed to leading a life that is fighting machines with no possibility of anything but potential death, or maybe best case scenario, we overthrow the machines and we have to start society from scratch. Or I can be plugged in and just think I'm enjoying my life. But the point is that even not knowing that, I would choose that. So even knowing that, even if you gave me that choice, it wouldn't lessen the impact of my choice. I would act with intent and I would choose to be plugged into the machine. I don't care about the fact that the machines are taking over the world. By the way, this should tell you exactly who I am if it ever comes down to a zombie apocalypse or anything else like that. Understand that the idea of a resistance has no appeal to me. And so I have no problem saying that I want to continue being plugged in, even if I know the entire time, because hey, I get to enjoy my life. Again, the point here is that acting with intent doesn't mean denying yourself. It just means understanding the consequences, the pros, the cons, weighing those things up, and deciding at the end of the day which decision is the one that you're okay with. You want to buy that couch, you want to have that shot of alcohol, you want to do whatever, do it. Just don't lie to yourself to get there. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Sorry if I'm a bit of a buzzkill again, but as always, have a good one.